Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Christina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Christina Schmidt. Today, I'm kicking off a series. It's going to be a 4-part series, so kind of long, but it is about the wellness of leaders and why that's so important. This is really why I do what I do. So this is so important to me. This is why I'm extending it out. I'm really digging into these elements because this is so crucial for leading well and then being able to continue leading well. When I started leading, I was in automotive manufacturing, and the biggest takeaway that I got from most leaders was just work more. So it became a very unhealthy cycle of tons of meetings, running from place to place to, like earning your stripes and kind of feeling like you have this badge of honor for being in the parking lot longer or traveling more days or how many airline points and hotel points you had, how many hours you were working every week. It was cultural that this was just a chronic thing that we did. And the biggest thing that we didn't do was take care of ourselves as leaders. So through this series, this is going to be my overview of kind of what do I mean by keeping track of the wellness of a leader or having a healthy leader. So I'm going to give you the overview today. And then each of the other 3 are going to focus on one element that every leader needs to stay focused on. So I'll go through the elements and then I'm going to go through kind of just explaining why these are important. So the elements, the 3 elements are number 1, your physical wellness. So this is what we most think of when we think about wellness, being healthy, making New Year's resolutions, all of that stuff. So it's our physical wellness. So it has to do with food that we eat. And when we think of our food as fuel rather than a way to kind of avoid problems or to, enjoy something, which I'm not saying that I don't enjoy food because I really, really do. But when we think of it as our fuel, and then we have some splurge times where we can think of it differently, then we think differently. So we're going to talk about that, and we'll talk about physical wellness around movement and exercise. So I'm going to bring a guest on who is more knowledgeable and expertise level than I am, to really talk about how this can affect us and how it affects our overall well-being and our ability to lead well and to show up well for the people in our lives. So that's the first one. Second one is going to be mental wellness. So, we talk about mental health a lot, but what does it mean to really be mentally well? And it might look like therapy and counseling, and it might look like taking some time and downtime away, some form of self-care within there. So, and I don't really mean bubble baths and that, because that's not really self-care. It's about really meeting your needs. So we'll explore some of that as well. And then finally, spiritual wellness. I've touched on this quite a bit, but just that ability to see ourselves as part of something bigger, having that understanding, taking time for prayer, meditation, for just really spending that time, that quiet, refilling time, that's going to be critical for a leader to maintain their wellness. So these 3 elements together work together. They're like 3 pieces that can't really be separated. So you'll probably find through the conversations that we'll talk about one, like when we're talking about physical wellness, we'll talk about how your mental wellness and how it benefits it and how it relates. And we'll talk about the same as spiritual wellness and probably blend a lot of spiritual and mental wellness because they are so much linked, because they're all part of our overall well-being. And it's that critical thing that we need as leaders, as parents, as friends, to show up consistently well. So just to kind of illustrate how this works, why it's important, and how it links together, I'm going to get vulnerable for a bit, and I'm going to share kind of my story and my journey of wellness and leadership and how it's helped me get to where I am today. So when I started leading, I kind of talked about it. I was, into the just work more mentality. And the more I worked, the better I was. That was kind of what I had this mindset of. So I remember I'd come through a leadership program, and all of us were always comparing how many hours we were putting in any given week. So that was kind of the badge of honor to get us started. But when I first got promoted into my real leadership position, I would say, very unhealthy. I was definitely overweight looking. But I I could eat probably as much as any man, right? I could just eat a lot. I wasn't exercising. I wasn't taking time to do any kind of reflection. I didn't really do any like planning of my life. I just kind of kept falling into whatever was next. Um, I certainly wasn't attending mass. I was Catholic, but because I was raised Catholic, but I wasn't attending mass. I wasn't praying. I would go to mass when I was with my family, and I'd pray before dinner with them. But other than that, that was about the extent of it. Um, so overall, very unhealthy in all three areas. So what started to change for me is I actually started with my physical health. I remember we were doing some competition, and I get somewhat competitive about weird, silly things, but there was some competition and we could like earn points for like writing down everything we ate. So I decided to, I knew from having done this in the past, every time I tried to write down everything I ate, I would just think constantly about food and just want to eat all the time. So I tried to do it backwards. So I created a plan of what I was going to eat, and then I ate it, and it was amazing. And within like a few weeks, I dropped like 11 pounds. It was amazing. Like this, like just kind of fell off of me because of this like mental change in how I looked at food. And I started to look at it as my fuel. And I started to look at it as like, oh, well, I can eat this food and I actually like this healthy food. I just wasn't eating it because I wasn't planning, I wasn't thinking, I was working until all hours, and then would come home and just collapse and eat whatever was there. I wouldn't have a lunch plan, so I'd eat stuff out of the vending machines or go out or something, but it was not healthy at all. But that transition and that first kind of like initial taking care of how I fueled my body kind of launched me into something. So once I dropped some weight and I had more energy, I started actually exercising. And it wasn't a ton. I was doing 5Ks or something like that, but I started doing some movement, and that helped. Then my sister challenged me to, because she and I think we were going through some breakups. But we needed something to focus on. So she challenged me to run a half marathon with her. And I was like, oh, geez, I'm not really running. I don't really know what I can do. But I was like, fine, we'll do it. So we both did it. Neither one of us was very trained, but that launched this like exercise regime for me. So I joined a run group, and started making some friends, and started to really just focus on running. And that changed my other habits. So, along with being able to eat like any man, I could drink beer like any man as well. So, but this needing to be awake early on Saturday mornings changed some of those habits for me. So this like launch into this physical wellness, it started to kind of overhaul my whole life. And I started getting feedback from my boss. He's like, wow, this running thing is really good for you. You're getting better at work. you're focused more. And I took a step back and I was like, well, yeah, because I think I had all of this like pent up physical energy that needed to go someplace and just needed out of my head. And instead of doing it with exercise before, I was doing it with like going out to the bar till all hours of the night and or whatever, just unhealthy ways. So this physical wellness then helped me get a better grasp of some of my mental wellness and being able to actually take a step back and say, oh, let's pause for a minute. Let's, look at this. And so my overall, my work got better, my social life got better, my like overall well-being was better. Not great yet, but better. Then I started to move into some of my spiritual wellness. So I was like, I wanted to get back to church. I was starting to have, I got married. I started to have kids. So this is many years down the tracks, right? Started to have kids and want something better for them. I wanted something more for them as far as spiritual wellness goes. So I started to dig into my faith and I started to really start to actually understand it more and grow in it and see that there are different paths and different things that we could do, not just following the what I should do path, which is what I was doing before. I was in this leadership track, just saying, this is, the thing that makes me look successful, makes me feel successful to others. And, looking back, like on paper, you would have said, absolutely, I was successful. It was, I was kept getting promoted. I continued to get pay raises. I was getting praise. I was getting all of these things, but ultimately I was coming home and crashing and, indulging in very unhealthy habits at the same time. So once I started to really dig into this spiritual wellness, I started to almost redo and rethink even how I was getting my physical wellness. So before that, I started running marathons and I would run if I was even tired and I was like draining my body and overdoing the physical stuff. So I normalized that a bit. And then my mental state got better. I was like reflecting more and I was saying, well, this is actually what I want, not this. And I was able to start to take a step back and reassess where I was because I started putting it all back together. And so what does that do for us? That when we can start to really put everything together and start putting everything in perspective by having all three of those elements together, we're now able to and focus handle stress better and focus our energies better. So it overall allows us to show up for our teams, for our families, for our commitments. We can then show up better. So putting all of this together, I was hit with some tremendously overwhelming news, we'll say, back a year and a half ago. But because I had been working on all three of these wellness things for so long, I was able to handle it, to work through it at a pace. I sought additional support to support my mental wellness because I realized I hadn't actually focused on that at all, but then continue to have the same supports and more supports in all of those other areas in my spiritual and my physical wellness as well. So having those three, having the baseline and then being able to pull and increase and decrease levers as needed was so key in being able to handle this big life changing, shattering event that happened. And I was already down the path of where I was headed with this leadership training and how I wanted to support leaders before all of this happened. But it just solidified that this is the path. This is the thing that leaders need. Leaders need to be well rounded in these areas and continue to focus on themselves, to develop deeper wellness, deeper spirituality, deeper mental wellness, deeper, more sustainable, I guess you could say, physical wellness, so that they are there. They can ride those rough waves in life, in business, and everything else, because what's important as a leader is to show up consistently for your team. So over the course of the next few episodes in this series, again, we're going to bring in these guests. We're going to talk through what this looks like, how this would help you as a leader, and give you some very practical first steps and maybe even some advanced steps. So maybe you're already kind of down the path, but what's the next step if you're down that path? So very practical things that you can put in place so you can better improve or balance all of these areas of wellness. So as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, share it with a friend, subscribe. Very importantly, go on to Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a review, because this helps the algorithm and it helps get the word out to more people. I'm very excited about this series, so please share it. I think it is very critical for all leaders to hear. So please do all those things and share it with the people that you love and you would love to see succeed. I will see you next time on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit ChristinaSchmidt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.